When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood to lecture Republicans about greed, she wore shoes worth more than most Americans earn in a week. Her speech about inequality lasted 12 minutes. Senator Kennedy's response would last 3 hours. And by the end, the socialist in designer clothes would have nothing left but her Instagram account. What happened in that hearing room would end a political career. But more importantly, it would expose the truth about performance activism, celebrity politics, and what happens when someone forgets that representing the people means actually helping them. The House Oversight Committee hearing room hummed with anticipation that October morning in 2025. Young progressive staffers packed the gallery. 3 rows deep, smartphones already positioned at perfect angles, ready to capture their hero's moment of glory. This wasn't just a hearing about economic inequality and corporate greed. This was going to be viral content gold. The kind of clips that would dominate social media for days, maybe weeks. The kind of moment that built movements or at least followers. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez knew this instinctively. At 35, she'd mastered the art of the political performance in ways that would have baffled previous generations of congresspeople. She entered the hearing room with the practiced awareness of someone who'd learned camera angles before she'd learned parliamentary procedure. Her outfit spoke designer without shouting prices. Those details would come later, courtesy of a Louisiana senator with a thick folder and a thicker accent. She moved through the space like a celebrity arriving at a premiere. Knowing without looking where every lens was positioned, which angles would be most flattering, what lighting would make her shine. The gallery erupted as she approached the witness table. Applause, cheers, a few whistles. One young woman in a Bernie Sanders shirt had tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed at being in the same room as her icon. Phones rose like a field of flowers turning toward the sun. 3 seats down from the committee chairman, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, sat motionless, hands folded on the table before him, watching AOC's entrance with the focused attention of a predator studying prey. At 59, Jordan still carried himself with the coiled stillness he'd developed as a college wrestler. Patient, disciplined, waiting for the moment when his opponent would overextend and create an opening. He wore no jacket, just a blue button-down shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows. Working man's uniform, no pretense. The contrast with AOC's carefully curated appearance would not be lost on anyone paying attention. Further down the table, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana appeared to be napping. His chin rested on his chest, wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose, hands folded peacefully over a manila folder that lay before him. To the untrained eye, he looked like someone's grandfather who'd wandered into the wrong meeting and dozed off, waiting for it to end. But those who knew the senator really knew him recognized the act. The old man routine that made people careless, that encouraged them to say things they shouldn't, to reveal themselves in ways they'd later regret. Neither Jordan nor Kennedy was sleeping. Both were watching, both were waiting, and both knew something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, basking in the adoration of her supporters, did not. The trap had already been set. Committee Chairman Jamie Rassin of Maryland banged his gavel with the resigned energy of a man who'd already lost control of the proceedings before they'd begun. At 72, Rassin had seen enough political theater to recognize when he was merely providing the stage rather than directing the show. The committee will come to order, he announced, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who wished he were anywhere else. We welcome Representative Ocasio-Cortez, who will provide testimony on economic inequality in America. AOC stood, and for a moment the room held its breath. She adjusted the microphone with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this thousands of times, smiled directly at the cameras positioned throughout the room, and delivered her opening line with perfect timing. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to speak truth to power today." The gallery exploded. This was what they'd come for. This was their champion, their voice, speaking truth to the corrupt, the complicit, the powerful men who'd held America hostage for generations. Phones captured every word, every gesture, already composing tweets and posts and captions that would make this moment live forever in the digital sphere. What none of them knew, what AOC herself didn't know, was that this origin story she was about to tell, this carefully crafted narrative of struggle and authenticity, would become the weapon used to destroy her. "I come before you as someone who knows struggle," she began, her voice Finding the rhythm she'd perfected over hundreds of speeches and Instagram videos. I was a bartender. I served drinks to people wearing suits. Just like the ones you're wearing now. I poured cocktails for the wealthy while I myself couldn't afford the rent on my apartment. I know what it's like to choose between paying bills and buying groceries. I know what it means to live paycheck to paycheck. To wake up every morning wondering if this will be the day you finally fall through the cracks. The gallery nodded along, some mouthing the words they'd heard before. The origin story that had made AOC famous. The bartender who became a congresswoman. The working-class hero who'd stormed the gates of power. Her voice rose, gathering momentum like a wave building toward shore. Unlike many in this room. Unlike the wealthy donors who fund your campaigns. Unlike the corporate lobbyists who write your legislation. Unlike the billionaires who own your votes. I represent real working people. People who work 2 jobs and still can't pay rent. People who are one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. People who have been told that capitalism will save them while it's actually killing them. The energy in the room shifted, electricity building in the air. This was what she did best. The crescendo. The moral fury. The righteous indignation that made her supporters feel seen and her opponents feel accused. But then she made a critical mistake. She didn't stop at righteous. She went further. Let me be clear, she said, her hand lifting to emphasize the point. And I want everyone watching to hear this. Billionaires shouldn't exist. Applause erupted, but she talked over it. Riding the wave. Nobody, and I mean nobody, needs $1 billion. Not when children are going hungry in the wealthiest nation on earth. Not when families are homeless while empty luxury apartments sit dark in Manhattan. Not when workers are dying because they can't afford insulin that costs pennies to produce. Every billionaire represents a policy failure. Every private jet is theft from the people who actually created that wealth. Her voice was rising now. Theatrical and passionate. The gallery was on its feet. And she fed off their energy like a performer in the spotlight. You want to talk about violence? Let's talk about violence. Her fist came down on the table with force. The microphone jumping from the impact. Capitalism is violence. It is killing people right now as we sit in this comfortable room with our government salaries and our health insurance. People are dying. The rich are hoarding resources while children starve. And you. Her fingers shot out, pointing at the Republican side of the committee like a prosecutor identifying criminals in a lineup. You sit there in your expensive suits bought with donations from corporate PACs. And you enable this violence. You serve Wall Street, not Main Street. You protect oligarchs while workers suffer. You're not just complicit in economic violence. You're active participants. Every vote you cast that protects billionaire wealth is a vote that kills a worker who can't afford healthcare. Can't afford housing. Can't afford to survive in the system you've created. The gallery was chanting now, a rhythmic pulse. AOC, AOC, AOC. She let it wash over her for a moment. Then raised her hand for silence. They gave it immediately, eager to hear more. And while you deny climate change, while you take money from fossil fuel companies, the planet is dying. We have 12 years, maybe less, before we reach a point of catastrophic climate collapse. Your children will curse your names for what you've done. Your grandchildren will ask why you chose short-term profit over their survival. And you'll have no answer because there is no answer that justifies what you're doing. She paused, shifted her tone to something more vulnerable, more personal. This was the pivot she'd practiced, the moment when righteous fury gave way to wounded dignity. They attack me because I tell the truth. They hate me because I'm a woman of color who won't stay quiet. Who won't play their game. Who won't pretend that this system is working when it's fundamentally broken. They're terrified of democratic socialism because it threatens their power, their privilege, their ability to exploit the poor while preaching about free markets and personal responsibility. And then she delivered her closing line. The one she knew would make headlines. The one designed to cement her revolutionary credentials. I wore a dress with tax the rich emblazoned on it to the Met Gala. Some people criticized that, said I was being hypocritical attending an elite event while preaching about inequality. But someone needs to speak truth in spaces of power. In spaces where the elite gather and pretend that poverty doesn't exist just outside their gilded walls. I'm proud to be a democratic socialist. And I will never apologize for fighting for the working class. She sat down to a standing ovation that shook the room. Young staffers cheering, phones capturing every angle, gallery on their feet with tears in their eyes. This was history. This was their moment. This was everything they'd hoped for. AOC smiled, perfectly composed, Instagram ready, certain of her victory. She'd crushed them. She'd owned the Republicans with facts and logic and moral authority. They had no response. They couldn't respond. How do you argue against someone fighting for justice? She was wrong about that. Catastrophically wrong. Republicans sat in stunned silence. But not because they were defeated. They were processing the audacity, the performance, the complete disconnection between the words and the person speaking them. Some shook their heads slightly. Others took notes. All of them recognized what had just happened. AOC had overextended. She'd exposed herself. And now came the counterattack. Jim Jordan remained absolutely still. Expression revealing nothing. Inside he was cataloging everything she'd said. The bartender story, the working class credentials, the moral superiority, the Met Gala address. Every word would matter soon. Every claim would need to be examined. But not by him. He had a different role to play. The applause eventually died the way all applause eventually does. The gallery settled back into their seats, confident in their champion's dominance. Curious what the Republican response would be. Would they sputter in rage? Would they make excuses? Would they reveal their true colors as defenders of the wealthy elite? Chairman Rassin looked at Jordan with something approaching sympathy. The congressman from Ohio was about to try to respond to a masterclass in moral rhetoric. How could he possibly match what they just witnessed? Representative Jordan Rassin said, his voice weary. You may respond. Jordan slowly took his time adjusting the microphone. When he spoke, his voice carried none of AOC's theatrical passion, none of her moral fury. Just flat Midwestern observation delivered in the tone of someone describing the weather. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He paused. Let the room settle completely. Representative Ocasio-Cortez. That was quite a performance. The word landed softly but unmistakably. Performance. Not speech. Not testimony. Performance. He let it sit there for a moment. Let people process the implication. Passionate. Emotional. Very social media friendly. Another deliberate pause. But let's talk about actual results. Not rhetoric. Let's talk about what you've built. Not what you've said. AOC's confident smile flickered, barely perceptible. But the cameras caught it. This wasn't the script. Republicans were supposed to defend billionaires to reveal themselves as corporate shills. They weren't supposed to pivot to questions about results. I represent Ohio's 4th district. Jordan continued his tone. Conversational. Almost friendly. Real working class. Not the Instagram version of working class. Actual manufacturing workers. Farmers. Small business owners who don't have time to post about their struggles on social media because they're too busy actually working. He gestured vaguely at the space around them. We have jobs in my district. Manufacturing jobs. Good jobs that pay decent wages and provide benefits. We believe in opportunity, not handouts. We believe in freedom, not socialism. And you know what? It's working. Unemployment is down. Businesses are opening, not closing. Crime is falling, not rising. Families are getting ahead, not falling behind. Jordan turned slightly, addressing AOC directly. Now, you talk a lot about serving the working class. You just gave us quite a speech about representing working people. So, let's compare our districts, shall we? Let's look at actual outcomes. Not passionate rhetoric. His voice remained level, factual, devastating in its calm certainty. My district unemployment trending down. Businesses opening their doors. Crime rates falling. People building lives and futures. Your district crime rates climbing, businesses fleeing to literally anywhere else. Constituents trying desperately to reach your office and getting no response while their congresswoman is busy becoming a celebrity. He paused. Let the contrast sink in. You give great speeches about inequality and justice and the working class. Very moving speeches. Very shareable content. But here's my question. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, what have you actually built? The question hung in the air like an accusation? Not proposed. Not tweeted about. Not given passionate speeches about. What have you built? What jobs exist in your district because of your work? What businesses has your district attracted through your efforts? What actual, tangible, measurable value have you added to the lives of the people who elected you to represent them? AOC opened her mouth to respond. Nothing came out. She closed it, opened it again. Her eyes darted to her phone on the table. The device that usually offered validation support a stream of affirmation that she was right and good and fighting the good fight. It sat silent. Jordan didn't wait for an answer. He knew there wasn't one. But Representative, I'm just a simple congressman from Ohio. His Midwest accent deliberately thickened the self-deprecation calculated and ineffective. I'm not a constitutional scholar like Chairman Rassin. I'm not an expert on economics or philosophy or all these big theories you talk about. He looked down the table towards Senator Kennedy, and something in his expression shifted. Respect mixed with anticipation, like someone about to watch a master craftsman at work. Fortunately, we have someone here today who might be able to offer some perspective on economic policy and the responsibilities of public service. Kennedy sat up as if waking from a pleasant nap. The movement was slow, deliberate, theatrical in its own right. His eyes opened fully, and they were sharp, alert, entirely awake. They'd been awake the whole time. He smiled, and the expression was polite, southern, grandfatherly, and absolutely predatory if you knew how to read it. Mr. Chairman, Jordan continued, his voice carrying just the faintest edge of something darker. I believe Senator Kennedy of Louisiana requested time to testify today. Chairman Rassin, who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, nodded confirmation. He did. Perhaps the senator could provide some insight on economic policy and the responsibilities of elected officials. Jordan's pause was perfectly timed and maybe addressed some of the inconsistencies in the representative's testimony. AOC's confident smile vanished completely. She leaned forward, tried to object, her voice carrying a hint of panic she couldn't quite suppress. Mr. Chairman, I wasn't informed that Senator Kennedy would be testifying today. I wasn't given time to prepare. Senator Kennedy was invited as an expert witness on economic policy. Rassin interrupted his tone, suggesting this argument was already lost. And everyone knew it. He has the floor. Kennedy stood with the careful precision of a Southern gentleman. Slow, unhurried, deliberate, he organized the papers in his manila folder with methodical care, each movement purposeful, giving the room time to shift its attention to understand that something important was about to happen. The gallery had gone quieter. Now confused. Who was this old man? What could he possibly say that mattered? AOC's supporters still looked confident, but uncertainty flickered at the edges. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. She was supposed to deliver her devastating moral speech. Republicans were supposed to sputter and make excuses. And everyone would go home knowing that justice had been served and truth had been spoken to power. But scripts only work when everyone agrees to follow them. Jordan sat back down, arms crossed loosely, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. His work was done. He'd created the opening set. The stage asked the questions that had no good answers. Now the Louisiana senator would finish what Jordan had started. Kennedy looked at AOC over his wire-rimmed glasses. And when he spoke, his Louisiana drawl filled the room like warm honey. Sweet, slow, and capable of catching anything it touched. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, he began, his voice gentle, almost kind. That was a mighty fine speech you just gave us. Very moving, very emotional, very passionate. He pulled the manila folder closer, and the label became visible to every camera in the room, every phone in the gallery. The socialists' closet, very concerned with inequality and greed and the struggles of the working class. Kennedy opened the folder slowly with the care of someone handling evidence at a trial. Which in a sense he was. So, let's discuss your relationship with equality. Shall we? Specifically, how equal you are to the people you claim to represent. The first photograph emerged from the folder. Glossy 8x10. Impossible to ignore even from the gallery. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the Met Gala. Draped in a designer gown that looked like it cost more than most people made in a year. Surrounded by celebrities whose combined wealth exceeded the GDP of small nations. Photographed from every flattering angle. Looking every inch the star she'd become. And across the back of the dress in bold red letters. Tax the rich. Kennedy placed it on the table where every camera could capture it. Where the image would be frozen forever in the permanent record of this hearing. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. The photograph spoke volumes all by itself about hypocrisy, about performance, about the gap between rhetoric and reality. Then, after letting the image breathe, after letting everyone in the room process what they were seeing, he spoke. September 2021, The Met Gala. His voice remained gentle, conversational. Ticket price, $35. He let that number expand in the air. Fill the room, sink into consciousness like a stone dropping into still water. While your constituents couldn't afford rent, AOC's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. This wasn't happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. Senator Kennedy was just some old man from Louisiana. Just a character who played up his accent for folksy appeal. He couldn't be serious. He couldn't have evidence. He couldn't. The second photograph landed on the table. Then a third. Then a fourth. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's carefully constructed world began to collapse in real time. One glossy image at a time. While America watched, Kennedy pulled photographs from his folder with the steady rhythm of someone dealing cards. Each one landing on the table with soft finality. They were all AOC's own Instagram posts. Images she'd carefully curated and shared with her millions of followers, presented now as evidence in her own trial. "This is you at New York Fashion Week," he said, placing down an image of AOC in designer clothes surrounded by models and photographers looking every inch the celebrity she'd become. "This is you at a gala for Vogue magazine." Another photo. "This is you having lunch with Anna Wintour at some establishment where the appetizers cost more than your constituents spend on groceries in a week." The photos spread across the table like a deck of cards, revealing a losing hand. Each one showed AOC living a lifestyle that bore no resemblance whatsoever to the struggling bartender narrative she'd just finished delivering. Designer outfits in every photo. Exclusive events. Celebrity gatherings. The life of someone who'd left the working class far, far behind. "These are from your own Instagram account, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez." Kennedy observed, his voice carrying gentle curiosity rather than harsh accusation. "You post these images yourself. You want people to see them. The designer outfits, the exclusive events, the celebrity friends, the lifestyle that comes with fame." He paused, tilted his head slightly. "For someone who represents the working class, you sure do spend an awful lot of time with people who've never worked a day in their lives." A sound rippled through the gallery. Not quite laughter. Not quite gasps. Something in between. Some of AOC's supporters were starting to look uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Suddenly uncertain about the narrative they believed in so completely just minutes before. Kennedy pulled out another photograph. This one, of a sleek, modern building rising against the New York skyline. "This is where you live. Navy-Yard neighborhood. Very nice area. Very expensive area." He placed the photo down with the same gentle care as if handling something delicate. "This building has a doorman, 24-hour concierge service, rooftop pool, state-of-the-art fitness center, yoga studio, wine bar, all the amenities that make life comfortable for people who've made it." He looked at AOC over his glasses. "Average rent in this building, $3 a month. Your congressional salary is $174 a year. That puts you in the top 10% of American earners. Top 10%. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez." He let those numbers sit there. Let people do the math in their heads. Yet here you are sitting in a congressional hearing lecturing others about having too much. About inequality. About the need to redistribute wealth. While you live in luxury that most of your constituents will never experience. Kennedy's voice dropped to something softer. Almost sad. "For a democratic socialist who believes in equality and redistribution, you sure do live an awful lot like a capitalist." Movement in the gallery caught everyone's attention. An elderly woman standing slowly. Her small frame somehow commanding the room's focus despite her size. She was Puerto Rican, maybe 70, dressed simply in a worn dress that had been washed so many times the colors had faded to pastels. Her hands gripped an old purse knuckles. Prominent skin paper thin from decades of work. Kennedy paused immediately, giving her space, showing her the respect the room demanded. "Ma'am, do you have something you'd like to say?" "My name is Carmen Rodriguez," she said, her accent thick, her voice wavering but determined. "I live in the Bronx. Your district congresswoman." AOC's face went pale. Carmen pulled a photograph from her purse. Worn at the edges, creased from being handled many times. It showed a younger AOC during her first campaign smiling wide arm around this same elderly woman. They looked happy in the photo. Hopeful, like they were building something together. "You came to my neighborhood when you were running for office." Carmen continued, her voice gaining strength from memory. "You took pictures with everyone. With me, with my neighbors. With the children playing in the street. You ate at our restaurants. You went to our churches. You said you were one of us from our community. You promised that you wouldn't forget us. Her hands trembled slightly, holding the photograph like evidence of a broken covenant. I voted for you. My whole family voted for you. We thought, finally, someone who understands what our lives are like. Someone who knows what it means to struggle. Someone who would fight for us in Washington. Her voice cracked and the room leaned forward, collectively drawn into her pain. Last winter, my building had no heat. The landlord, he doesn't fix things. He doesn't care about us. It was so cold, Congresswoman. So cold. I'm 68 years old. I worked 2 jobs cleaning offices because my social security isn't enough to live on. And I slept in my coat for 3 weeks because there was no heat. She paused, and in that pause, the weight of suffering filled the room. I called your office. Her voice was steady now, powered by something beyond tears. I called 15 times. I left messages. I explained that we needed help. That other people in my building needed help. That we were elderly people freezing in our own homes in New York City in the 21st century. I asked if someone could help us talk to the city, to housing authorities, to anyone who might make our landlord fix the heat. Carmen looked directly at AOC now, and her eyes held something far worse than anger. They held disappointment, the kind of disappointment that comes from believing in someone, trusting them, giving them your hope, and watching them throw it away. You never called back, not once. Not one time did anyone from your office call me back. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But I saw you on TV. At fashion shows. At parties with movie stars. On magazine covers. You forgot us the day after you won. We weren't useful to you anymore. She sat down slowly, heavily, still clutching that photograph of promises made and broken. No one moved. No one spoke. Even AOC's most devoted supporters in the gallery sat frozen, unable to reconcile what they just heard with the narrative they believed in. Kennedy gave the moment its proper weight. Let Carmen's testimony settle into the record and into everyone's consciousness before he continued. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler, more regretful. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, let me tell you about Maria Rodriguez. No relation to Carmen, though they live in the same neighborhood, shop at the same stores, attend the same church. Maria works 2 jobs. One cleaning offices at night. One stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day. She can barely afford her rent. She called your office 15 times over 6 months seeking help with housing assistance programs that she couldn't navigate on her own. He placed down call logs not detailed enough to be boring, just clear enough to show the pattern. Pages and pages of attempted contacts. Dates and times, creating a timeline of desperation and neglect. 15 calls. 6 months. No response. Want to know why she couldn't reach you? Kennedy pulled out printed screenshots from AOC's Instagram feed. Not quotes or captions, just the images themselves. AOC at New York Fashion Week. AOC doing a photo shoot for Vanity Fair magazine. AOC attending a Netflix premiere party dressed to the nines surrounded by celebrities because you were at fashion events. Because you were doing magazine photos, because you were attending celebrity parties. He spread the Instagram posts across the table, creating a timeline of glamour that ran parallel to Maria Rodriguez's unanswered calls. You weren't too busy to attend Fashion Week. You weren't too busy to pose for Vanity Fair. You were just too busy to help Maria Rodriguez keep her housing. AOC's phone on the table began buzzing once, twice, then continuously, a steady vibration that became impossible to ignore. The notifications that had always brought validation, that had provided a constant stream of affirmation that she was right and good and fighting the good fight, were bringing something else now. Even in real time, the narrative was shifting. The comments were turning. The support was cracking. She glanced at the phone, then quickly looked away. She couldn't bear to see what it said. Couldn't face the reality that her carefully constructed image was collapsing in real time. Broadcast live, captured by every camera in the room. Kennedy's voice pulled her attention back, though she wished it wouldn't. Now, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, let's discuss your boyfriend. His tone shifted slightly, became more conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made what came next more devastating. Or, as your campaign so creatively calls him, marketing consultant. AOC's eyes widened. A single word formed in her mind. Desperate and futile. No, but it was too late. Kennedy was already pulling out payment records from his folder. Organized and annotated. Impossible to misunderstand. Riley Roberts. Your longtime boyfriend. I'm sure he's a nice fellow. Kennedy placed the records down with the same gentle care he'd shown the photographs. Your campaign pays his LLC, which he conveniently formed shortly after you took office, thousands of dollars every single month. The payments are listed as compensation for marketing services. He looked up at AOC, genuine curiosity in his expression. I'm curious. And I think the voters in your district might be curious, too. What marketing services did Mr. Roberts provide? What campaigns did he design? What websites did he build? What materials did he create? What measurable results did his work produce? Silence. Complete absolute silence. I'll wait, Kennedy said patiently, looking at AOC with the expectant expression of someone genuinely wanting an answer to a reasonable question. AOC opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Riley provides various consulting services that support the campaign's digital strategy. And what services? Kennedy interrupted gently. Specifically, what does he do? He helps with digital outreach and social media coordination. And show me the work product. Kennedy's voice remained soft, but now it carried an edge. Show me one website he built, one campaign he designed, one piece of content he created. Show me anything that justifies thousands of dollars in monthly payments. She couldn't. The silence stretched, became painful, became impossible to ignore. The gallery watched, even her supporters, now visibly uncomfortable. Some were already quietly leaving, unable to watch the destruction of their hero. That's what I thought, Kennedy said, and his Louisiana draw carried disappointment rather than triumph. The Federal Election Commission is curious about the same thing. They've opened an investigation into your campaign finance practices. They want to know what your boyfriend actually did to earn all that money. They want documentation, work products, evidence of services rendered. He leaned forward slightly and his voice sharpened. Because what it looks like, what it very much looks like, is that you put your boyfriend on the campaign payroll for a no-show job. That while volunteers were working 60-hour weeks for free because they believed in your message. Your boyfriend was collecting thousands of dollars for undefined consulting services. Kennedy straightened, gestured to the evidence spread across the table. You gave quite a speech earlier about corruption, about Republicans serving corporate masters, about the wealthy gaming the system and exploiting loopholes and using their power to enrich themselves at the expense of regular people. His voice dropped. But while you were pointing fingers, while you were making accusations, while you were presenting yourself as the champion of the people against corruption, you had your boyfriend on the campaign payroll. That's not democratic socialism, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. That's nepotism. That's corruption. That's exactly what you accuse others of doing. A young woman stood in the gallery, early 20s, wearing a faded Bernie Sanders t-shirt from the 2016 campaign. True believer aesthetic, exhaustion and betrayal written across her face. May I speak? Her voice shook with emotion, barely held in check. Kennedy gestured permission. Please, my name is Sarah Chen. I volunteered for AOC's first campaign. She pulled a worn campaign t-shirt from her backpack. Red with white lettering faded from too many washings. I worked 60 hours a week doing the unglamorous work that makes campaigns function. Phone banking until my voice was door knocking until my feet bled. Data entry until my eyes couldn't focus anymore. Her voice strengthened as she spoke, powered by the rage of someone who'd been used. I was completely unpaid, not underpaid, completely unpaid. The campaign said they couldn't afford to pay volunteers. They said we were building something bigger than money. That we were fighting corruption and corporate influence. That we were part of a revolution. She looked at AOC with undisguised betrayal written across every feature. I believed that I worked 3 jobs to support myself while volunteering for free 60-hour weeks on top of my paid work because I believed in the message you were selling. About fighting corruption. About serving the people instead of serving yourself. About being different than every other politician who promises change and then sells out the moment they get power. Her voice broke. Then I found out your boyfriend was getting paid thousands of dollars every single month while volunteers like me got nothing. You used us. You made us believe we were building something real. Something different. Something that mattered. But you were just running the same grift as everyone else. You just had better Instagram captions. Sarah threw the campaign shirt toward AOC's table. It landed in a crumpled heap on the polished wood. Bright red fabric, like an accusation, like a wound, like the death of hope. Kennedy let the shirt lie there. Let it serve as a visual reminder of broken promises. He didn't rush to his next point. The silence was more damaging than any words he could say. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost reflective. You know what the saddest part is, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez? People believed in you. People like Carmen. People like Maria. People like Sarah. They believed you were different. They believed you actually cared. They believed that finally, someone in Washington would remember where they came from and fight for the people who sent them there. He gestured to the evidence spread across the table. But you forgot them the moment you got what you wanted. And that brings us to the worst part of all. Kennedy pulled out a different set of photographs. And even from across the room, people could tell these were different from the Instagram posts. These weren't glossy celebrity shots. These were taken with cheap phone cameras by people documenting their own decline. Let's talk about the district you abandoned. The photographs Kennedy placed on the table next weren't meant to flatter. They were documentation, evidence, the kind of images people take when they want to prove something. When they need a record of what's happening because no one in power is paying attention. A storefront in the Bronx with plywood covering shattered windows. Someone had spray painted across it in uneven letters. AOC, where are you? A crime scene. Yellow police tape fluttering in the wind. Chalk outline faded but still visible on the pavement. Numbers marking evidence that would never lead to justice because there weren't enough police. And the ones who were there were too overwhelmed to solve every murder. A homeless encampment under an overpass that looked like something from a developing nation rather than New York City tents made from trash bags and shopping carts. People trying to survive in the richest city in the richest nation on earth. This is your district, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, Kennedy said quietly. These are the people you represent while you're attending galas and posing for magazine covers. He placed one photograph in the very center of the table, gave it prominence above all the others. A small restaurant with a family of 4 standing in front of it. The father, middle-aged and Puerto Rican, wore a faded shirt. The mother's exhaustion was visible even in the still image. 2 teenagers, a boy and girl, looked at the camera with expressions that had already learned disappointment too well. Behind them, painted across the front door in red letters, "Closed forever. The Martinez family," Kennedy said, his voice carrying the weight of something sacred being profaned. 3 generations. Rodriguez Family Restaurant. Traditional Puerto Rican food. They opened in 1972. Survived the recession of the 70s. Survived the crime waves of the 80s. Survived the economic collapse of 2008. They couldn't survive COVID lockdowns. Specifically lockdowns that you supported. Without providing any mechanism whatsoever to help small businesses survive them. A man stood in the gallery. The same man from the photograph. Though he looked years older now. Despite only months having passed. Miguel Martinez moved toward the front of the room slowly. As if each step cost him something he couldn't afford to pay. Kennedy gestured him forward with quiet respect. "Sir, would you like to tell the congresswoman about your restaurant?" Miguel's voice when he spoke was steady. But his hands shook. "My name is Miguel Martinez. That's my restaurant in that picture. My grandfather started it 53 years ago. My father built it into something special. Not just a restaurant, but a gathering place for our community. I was supposed to pass it to my children. That was the plan. That was what we worked for." He pulled folded letters from his pocket papers that had been read so many times they'd become soft as cloth creases deep from being opened and closed and opened again. COVID came. The lockdowns came. We supported them. Of course. We supported them. Public health matters. People's safety matters. We weren't angry about closing. We were scared like everyone. But we understood. His voice cracked slightly. But we needed help. The relief programs. PPP. Loans. EIDL. All these acronyms we'd never heard before. Forms and requirements. And documentation we didn't understand. We're good at cooking food and serving people and making families feel welcome. We're not good at navigating government bureaucracy. He unfolded one letter with shaking hands. Held it up for everyone to see. The header was visible even from the back of the room official congressional letterhead. I called Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office. My wife called. My daughter called. My father, who barely speaks English, tried to call and explain in broken English that we needed help 17 times total over 6 months. We left messages. We sent emails. We went to the district office in person and talked to staff members who promised someone would call us back. He held the letter higher. This is what we got. An automated response. It said the congresswoman was very busy with important legislative work, the Green New Deal, the January 6th committee, and would respond to constituent concerns when time permitted. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She never did. Not once. Not one single time did anyone from her office call us back with actual help. We lost the restaurant. 53 years of family history. 3 generations of work gone. We lost our savings trying to keep it open. We lost everything. Miguel paused, and in that pause, everyone could hear what he wasn't saying. All the dreams that had died with that restaurant. All the futures that had been foreclosed. All the grandchildren who wouldn't inherit what their great-grandfather had built. My father, the man who built that restaurant, who worked 7 days a week for 40 years without complaint, who believed in America and the American dream and the promise that hard work would be rewarded. He died 6 months after we closed. Heart attack, the doctor said, but I know what really killed him. He looked directly at AOC and his voice gained strength from anger. Watching his life's work disappear while his congresswoman was too busy with her Netflix documentary to return a phone call. Watching his family's future crumble while the woman who'd promised to fight for people like us was attending celebrity parties. Watching his American dream die while his elected representative was getting famous. His final words came out with quiet intensity. But you got your magazine covers. You got your podcast deals. You got your celebrity friends and your luxury apartment and your fancy clothes. We weren't important enough for you. We weren't good content for your Instagram. Miguel sat down and Kennedy let the testimony breathe. Let it sit heavy in the room. Let everyone process what they just heard. Not statistics, not policy debates, but the human cost of neglect. The price paid by real people when their representative chooses celebrity over service. When Kennedy spoke again, his voice carried controlled anger that was somehow more effective than shouting would have been. My staff made calls to your district. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, we spoke to dozens of your constituents. We asked them about their experiences trying to reach your office, trying to get help with federal programs, trying to get basic constituent services that every representative is supposed to provide. He pulled out handwritten notes, his own written in neat script during those phone calls. Mrs. Sandra Washington, 68 years old, lives in Tacoma Park. Her son is a veteran having trouble accessing his VA benefits. She called your office 14 times over 8 months. Never got a call back. Out of desperation, she called my office in Louisiana. I don't even represent her and my staff helped her navigate the VA bureaucracy within 1 week. He flipped a page. Mr. David Chen, small business owner in Rockville. His shop was damaged during civil unrest. He needed help navigating SBA disaster loans. Called your office 9 times over 2 months. Got exactly 1 form letter in response. That's it, 1 form letter. No actual help. His business closed. He's working as a night manager at a convenience store now. Trying to pay off the debts from a business that failed while his congresswoman couldn't be bothered to help him. Another page. The Garcia family. Legal immigrants from Guatemala who came here the right way. Who waited in line. Who followed every rule. They were trying to bring family members to America through proper legal channels. The process was taking years. Drowning them in bureaucratic red tape. They called you for help. You're on the House Judiciary Committee. Immigration is supposed to be one of your areas of expertise. No response. Nothing. They eventually hired an immigration lawyer they couldn't afford. Their family members are still waiting. Kennedy looked up from his notes and his voice carried something like wonder at the scale of the neglect. You held 2 town halls in the last 3 years. 2. Both at friendly venues with pre-screened attendees. Both designed to be content for your social media rather than actual opportunities for constituents to voice concerns. You don't face your constituents. You don't take their calls. You don't do the actual work of being a representative. His voice sharpened because the work is boring. It doesn't get likes on Instagram. It doesn't build your personal brand. It doesn't make you famous. And somewhere along the way, you decided that fame was more important than service. A veteran stood in the gallery, maybe 50 years old, bearing the kind of scars that are both visible and invisible. His VA cap sat slightly crooked combat ribbons from Afghanistan pinned to it. He had the bearing of someone who'd served. who'd seen things, who'd done his duty, and expected nothing more than that others would do theirs. Permission to speak, sir. He addressed Kennedy with military formality. Please, I'm Robert Williams. I live in Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's district. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division. Got out in 2019. Tried to reintegrate into civilian life. Tried to use the VA services that I'd earned through my service. He held up his phone showing a call log that scrolled on for screens. The VA system is a nightmare, even when you know how to navigate it. I called the Congresswoman's office 7 times over 6 months asking for help with healthcare benefits, with education benefits, with PTSD counseling that I desperately needed. I'm a veteran in her district having trouble with a federal agency that she has direct oversight authority over. Seems relevant, right? His jaw clenched. I got one call back from a young intern who took my information and said someone would follow up. No one ever did. I ended up getting help from a veterans nonprofit organization run by people who volunteer their time because they actually care about veterans. He paused and something cold entered his voice. But I saw Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez on television giving speeches about January 6th. About protecting democracy. About defending our institutions. Saw her at rallies talking about how much she supports veterans and their service. She just apparently doesn't support them enough to actually help them when they call her office asking for assistance. The veteran sat down and 3 other men in VA caps sitting near him nodded in silent solidarity. Brothers in arms who understood the particular betrayal of being abandoned by the people you'd served. Kennedy organized his papers and in the rustling there was something final. Something that suggested he was building toward a conclusion. When you entered Congress in January 2017, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, your financial disclosure showed a net worth of approximately $30. Not much, certainly, but consistent with your story about being a working-class bartender who'd struggled to make ends meet. Today, he paused, let the question hang. Today, your reported net worth is well over 7 figures. Book deals, speaking fees, Netflix documentary, podcast contracts, media appearances. You've made a fortune off being Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The brand, the celebrity, the progressive icon. Kennedy's voice dropped, became almost sad. You got rich while your district got poor. While small businesses like the Martinez family's restaurant closed. While veterans like Robert Williams couldn't get help. While elderly women like Carmen Rodriguez froze in their apartments. You accumulated wealth and fame and influence. While the people who elected you, who believed in you, who trusted you were abandoned. He pulled out one more set of photographs. Campaign photos from 2018 showing young AOC in the Bronx surrounded by Puerto Rican families smiling and promising and looking like she meant every word. Next to them, he placed current photos of those exact same streets. The same buildings, the same locations, but deteriorated, neglected, forgotten. The visual contrast was devastating. The before and after of broken promises made physical. You're Puerto Rican Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. You campaigned on representing your community. On never forgetting where you came from. On being the voice for people who'd been ignored by politicians for too long. Kennedy's voice carried genuine disappointment. Now, these are the same neighborhoods. Just 2 years apart. Look at the difference. Look at what happened while you were becoming famous. Carmen Rodriguez stood again, the elderly woman who'd testified earlier. But this time her sadness had transformed into something harder. Something that demanded to be heard. You used. Her voice shook with fury that had been building for years. You took our pictures. You hugged our children. You came to our churches and our restaurants. And you cried about your abuela back in Puerto Rico. And you made us truly believe that you understood what our lives were like. That you cared. That you were one of us. She held up that campaign photograph again. Young AOC smiling and promising everything. This is you saying you'd fight for us. This is you promising you wouldn't forget us. This is you swearing you'd be different than all the other politicians who used us for votes and then disappeared. Her hand shook holding the photograph. Where's that woman? Where did she go? Because the person I see on television at fashion shows and celebrity parties. That's not the woman who promised to help us. That's someone who used us as a ladder to climb to fame. Then kicked the ladder away. So no one else could follow. Carmen sat down and the photograph slipped from her hands, fell to the floor between the gallery and the witness table. Young AOC's smiling face looked up at everyone from where it had fallen. A promise that had been dropped and abandoned. Kennedy didn't pick it up. Let it lie there as evidence. As reminder. As accusation. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, you proposed the Green New Deal. Called it revolutionary. Said it would create millions of good-paying jobs. Would transform the economy. Would save the planet from climate catastrophe. Very ambitious. Very headline-grabbing. Very effective at making you the center of attention. He paused. How many jobs did it create in your district? Silence. I'll answer since you won't. 0. It created exactly 0 jobs. Passed exactly 0 legislation. Changed exactly 0 lives in any measurable way. But it got you on every magazine cover in America. Got you invited to every progressive podcast. Made you a star. Kennedy closed his folders. Stacked them neatly. You didn't build jobs. You didn't build opportunities. You didn't build a better life for your constituents. You built a brand. You built fame. You built yourself. And you did it on the backs of people who trusted you. Who believed in you. Who gave you their hope. His voice dropped to something colder than anger. Something closer to contempt. And that brings us to what you actually believe. Because you call yourself a democratic socialist. You say you believe in equality. In redistribution. In the moral imperative to share resources. So, let's examine your actual life choices and see if they match your rhetoric. Kennedy pulled out 2 final photographs and placed them side by side on the table with ceremonial precision. Left photo: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at a luxury event, champagne glass in her manicured hand designer dress that probably cost more than Carmen Rodriguez made in a year, surrounded by celebrities whose combined wealth exceeded the GDP of developing nations. Right photo: one of AOC's constituents. A woman in her 40s wearing a faded uniform from a service job. Standing exhausted in front of a dilapidated building in the Bronx. Both from your district. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, Kennedy said quietly. One you ignore. One you've become. The contrast was visceral. Undeniable. The two Americas separated not just by wealth, but by attention, by care, by basic human consideration. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, sitting at the witness table, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully constructed image, had no defense, no explanation, no answer that could bridge that gap or justify that disparity. She had only silence. And in that silence, her career ended. Kennedy's voice softened to something almost gentle, which made his next words more devastating than shouting would have been. You call yourself a democratic socialist. You believe in equality and redistribution and the moral obligation to share resources with those who have less. Very noble principles, Miss Ocasio-Cortez. Very inspiring rhetoric. He gestured to the photograph of her at the luxury event. Your congressional salary is $174 per year. That puts you in the top 10% of American earners. Top 10%. You make more than 90% of the people in this country. His question came quietly but unmistakably. So, when are you going to start redistributing your wealth? When are you going to give up your luxury apartment? When are you going to stop buying designer clothes and attending exclusive events? When do your principles apply to you? Pause. Let the hypocrisy breathe. Or do the rules about equality and redistribution only apply to people who are richer than you are? Is there some magic income level where democratic socialist principles stop applying? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you believe in socialism for everyone except Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC tried to respond, her voice coming out defensive and weak. The systemic changes I'm fighting for. I'm not asking about systems. Kennedy interrupted gently. I'm asking about you right now. Today, this moment. You lecture others about having too much. About inequality being violence. About the moral imperative to redistribute wealth. So when will you admit that you have too much? When will you redistribute your wealth to your struggling constituents? She tried again. The platform I have allows me to do what? Live like the people you condemn while calling it activism. To enjoy luxury while preaching about austerity. To accumulate wealth while demanding others give up theirs. Kennedy pulled out one final photograph. AOC's Tesla, sleek and expensive, parked in a reserved spot at her luxury building. Luxury electric vehicle, very environmental, very progressive, very expensive. He placed it down with the others. This car costs more than your constituents make in 2 years of full-time work at minimum wage. His slight smile carried no warmth. Socialist in the streets. Capitalist in the sheets. Or should I say capitalist in the luxury apartment with the rooftop pool and the doorman and the wine bar? A few people in the gallery laughed. Not her supporters, who were mostly gone now, but antagonists who'd waited years for this moment. AOC stood suddenly. Chair, scraping back her last defense. The only one she had left. This is a sexist attack. A racist attack. You're targeting me because I'm a woman of color who won't stay silent. Who threatens your power structure? Who speaks truth to my ma'am? Kennedy's interruption was soft, but final. Like a door closing. Your identity doesn't shield you from accountability. Being a woman of color doesn't give you permission to be corrupt. Being young doesn't excuse putting your boyfriend on the campaign payroll. Being progressive doesn't justify living in luxury while preaching about equality. He gestured to the evidence spread across the table. The luxury lifestyle. The abandoned constituents. The boyfriend payments. The celebrity appearances while people froze and starved and lost their businesses. This is what you are. Not what you say you are. Not what you market yourself as on Instagram. This, he tapped the photographs, is the truth. And eventually, always the truth comes out. Jim Jordan stood for the first time since Kennedy had begun his systematic destruction. He'd been silent for over an hour, letting the Louisiana senator do the work. But now he would deliver the final blow. Senator Kennedy, thank you for that thorough and illuminating examination of Representative Ocasio-Cortez's record. He turned to AOC and his voice carried no triumph. No satisfaction. Just the flat delivery of facts that couldn't be disputed. Representative, you asked me earlier what I built. You implied that I haven't accomplished anything. That I haven't helped anyone. That I'm just another corporate Republican serving the wealthy elite. His tone remained level or almost conversational. I've built trust with my constituents through consistent service. I've built relationships by showing up. By returning phone calls within 24 hours. By doing the unglamorous work that representative democracy requires. I've built a reputation for being accessible, responsive, present, for caring more about helping people than about building a personal brand. He gestured to the evidence Kennedy had presented. What have you built? A social media following? A celebrity profile? A personal brand worth millions in exposure and opportunity? A route out of the working class that you then pulled up behind you like a ladder? You climbed and kicked away. Jordan's voice hardened slightly. You used people's hopes and struggles and dreams as content for your personal elevation. You commodified their pain for your own gain. You turned their trust into your fame. That's not public service representative. That's exploitation. That's exactly the kind of predatory capitalism you claim to oppose. Just with better marketing and progressive branding. He sat down, his work complete. Kennedy packed his folders with the same methodical care he'd shown unpacking them. The hearing, for all practical purposes, was over. All that remained was watching the collapse happen in real time. Chairman Rassin banged his gavel with exhausted finality. This hearing is adjourned. The room emptied quickly. Committee members fled, Democrats, especially desperate to avoid cameras. To avoid being asked for comment. To avoid any association with AOC's toxic collapse. Squad members who'd arrived with her were conspicuously absent. Now having somehow known this was coming and chosen to be literally anywhere else. AOC remained at the witness table. Physically unable to move, emotionally unable to process what had just happened. Her staff had quietly left during Kennedy's presentation. The gallery had cleared of supporters. Her phone continued its relentless buzzing. Each notification bringing worse news. AOC sees luxury lifestyle under federal scrutiny. Washington Post. Boyfriend payments draw ethics investigation. CNN. The socialist in designer clothes. How AOC betrayed the working class. The Atlantic. Even friendly outlets were turning the narrative, flipping so completely that allies were scrambling to distance themselves. Kennedy walked past on his way out. Paused briefly. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I take no pleasure in this. I truly don't. I simply believe that people who lecture others about ethics and service should be able to withstand the same scrutiny they apply to everyone else. He continued walking back to Louisiana. Back to constituent services. Back to actually doing the job she'd forgotten how to do. Jordan stopped at her table. Looked down at her with something approaching pity. Without the brand. Without the performance. Without the celebrity status. Who are you? What do you have to offer? What can you actually do for people? He didn't wait for an answer. There wasn't one to give. AOC finally stood on shaky legs and left the hearing room alone. No staff to guide her. No supporters to cheer her. No cameras following for content. Just her walking through marble halls that suddenly felt much less welcoming. Facing consequences she'd never imagined would come. By evening, MSNBC had issued a carefully worded statement about reviewing all contributor arrangements in light of recent information. Translation: she was fired by midnight. Speaking venues across the country were canceling bookings. Universities suddenly too busy to host her. Progressive organizations concerned about the optics. Podcast invitations withdrawn. The entire infrastructure of celebrity activism that had sustained her was collapsing overnight. By morning, the calls for her resignation were coming from within her own party. The district's Democratic Party office was flooded with demands for a primary challenger. And by afternoon, one emerged: Maria Santos, a community organizer who'd lived in the Bronx her entire life. Who'd never left. Who knew every street, every family, every struggle that AOC had forgotten the moment she'd gotten famous. Who'd never been on Instagram, never sought celebrity, never wanted anything except to actually help her community. Early polling put Santos ahead by 43 points. 3 months later, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez announced she would not seek re-election. The statement was perfectly crafted for social media, full of buzzwords about focusing on activism, fighting for change outside the traditional system, continuing the revolution through other means. It included carefully selected photographs from her 10-year dramatic music for the video version. Inspirational quotes about the future. It fooled absolutely no one. Everyone understood what it really meant. Her political career was over. Finished. Destroyed not by Republicans or by conservative media or by billionaires, but by her own hypocrisy laid bare for everyone to see. In a podcast studio in Brooklyn 6 months later, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat before a microphone recording another episode about capitalism and inequality and the need for revolution. Her Instagram following had stabilized at roughly half what it had been at its peak. The true believers remained people so invested in the narrative that no amount of evidence could shake their faith. Everyone else had moved on. The designer clothes remained. Most of the celebrity friends remained, though some had quietly stopped returning calls. The performance continued, but to smaller audiences with less impact. Increasingly irrelevant as new progressive stars rose who hadn't yet been exposed as frauds. In her former district, Maria Santos was holding her third town hall of the week. The room was packed with actual constituents. Not screened, not curated, just people who lived there and wanted to talk to their representative. Santos's office had already processed more constituent service requests in 3 months than AOC's office had handled in her final year. "I'm not here to be famous," Santos told reporters who asked about the contrast. "I'm here to help people. That's the job. That's the only job that matters." In Ohio, Jim Jordan was returning constituent phone calls within 24 hours, holding town halls where anyone could show up and ask anything. Doing the unglamorous work of democracy that never made headlines, but actually helped people. In Louisiana, Kennedy was back to constituent services regardless of party affiliation, accessible and responsive, and present in ways that had nothing to do with building a brand and everything to do with fulfilling the actual responsibilities of elected office. Both men understood what AOC had never learned. Fame was fleeting, but service was forever. Performance could build a brand, but only results built trust. Celebrity could win elections, but only actual work justified holding office. And eventually, always, inevitably, the receipts came due. The working class that AOC had claimed to represent moved on without her. They found representatives who actually helped them, who actually showed up, who actually answered their calls and did the boring, unglamorous work that democracy required. The socialist in designer clothes became a cautionary tale. A story told to warn about what happens when performance replaces service. When brand matters more than results. When someone forgets that representing the people means actually helping them rather than using them as props for personal advancement. Kennedy had taught that lesson with Louisiana gentleness and devastating effectiveness. Jordan had enabled it with wrestlers' patience and strategic precision. And AOC had learned it the hardest way possible by losing everything she'd built on a foundation of sand. In the end, the truth had come out. As it always does. As it always will. And no amount of Instagram filters. No quantity of inspirational quotes. No volume of progressive rhetoric could hide what everyone could finally see. The emperor had no clothes. The socialist had no principles. The representative had no interest in actually representing anyone except herself. America had learned a valuable lesson. Some learned it joyfully vindicated in their skepticism. Others learned it painfully forced to confront that they'd been fooled by an attractive package and empty promises. But everyone learned it eventually. Performance isn't service. Celebrity isn't leadership, and eventually someone brings the receipts. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had bet her entire career on the hope that no one would. She'd been wrong. And now she sat in a Brooklyn podcast studio speaking to a shrinking audience about revolution and change. While the people she'd claimed to fight for moved on without her finding actual representatives who actually cared. The bartender who became a congresswoman, who became a celebrity, who became a cautionary tale. The story was complete. The lesson was taught. The receipts had been paid. And in the end, truth had done what it always does. It had won.